The concept of the Satanic New World Order has been a topic of discussion among conspiracy theorists for decades. According to this ideology, a group of powerful individuals and organizations are working together to create a one-world government that would control every aspect of people's lives. Recently, some proponents of this theory have argued that the idea of global warming is being used as a tool to oppress people and bring about this new world order. The argument is that the elite are using the threat of climate change to manipulate people into accepting a range of policies and laws that would erode their freedoms and increase government control. For example, measures to reduce carbon emissions, such as carbon taxes and restrictions on air travel, are seen as a way to limit people's mobility and choice. Similarly, the emphasis on renewable energy and sustainable living is viewed as applied to control people's access to resources and dictate how they live their lives. Proponents of this theory point to the fact that many of the world's most powerful individuals and organizations, including the United Nations, the European Union, and the World Bank, are actively promoting the idea of climate change and the need for urgent action to address it. They argue that these organizations are using the threat of climate change to justify a range of policies and laws that would increase the power and control over people's lives. For example, the Paris Agreement, which was signed by almost 200 countries in 2015, sets out a range of measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate the effects of climate change. However, some critics argue that the agreement is a Trojan horse for a range of policies that would erode national sovereignty and increase global governance. Another argument made by proponents of this theory is that the idea of climate change is being used to create a sense of fear and panic among the population. This, they argue, is a classic tactic used by those in power to manipulate people into accepting policies and laws that they might not otherwise agree to. By creating a sense of urgency and emergency, governments and other organizations can justify a range of measures that would normally be considered extreme or draconian. For example, the idea of a climate emergency has been used to justify a range of policies, including the declaration of national emergency, the imposition of curfews and travel restrictions, and the deployment of military personnel to enforce climate-related policies. However, it is essential to note that the overwhelming scientific consensus is that climate change is real, and it is primarily caused by human activities such as the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation. The evidence for climate change is robust and comes from multiple lines of research, including temperature records, melting of glaciers, and shifts in the distribution of plants and animals. While it is true that some individuals and organizations may be using the idea of climate change to promote their own interests or agendas, this does not mean that the underlying science is flawed or that the threat of climate change is not real. In conclusion, while the idea that the Satanic New World Order is using global warming propaganda to oppress us is a compelling one for some, it is essential to approach this topic with a critical and nuanced perspective. The scientific evidence for climate change is clear, and it is crucial that we take action to address this pressing global issue. However, it is also important to be aware of the potential for manipulation and exploitation by those in power and to ensure that any policies or laws implemented to address climate change are fair, just, and respectful of individual rights and freedoms. By being informed, critical, and engaged, we can work towards a more sustainable and equitable future for all, while avoiding the pitfalls of manipulation and control.